Welcome back to a brand new video on the channel. Hope you guys are having a fantastic day. Now, AI and Depin and storage, whatever you want to call it, it is heating up. Depin specifically has been performing really well. Robotics is starting to wake up as well. I will drop a robotics tier list after this one, probably in the next couple of days. However, let's get into this one now. You have to be a little bit, I'm going to be a little bit more conservative just because we are coming towards the end of the cycle. I don't want to be giving crazy price predictions, especially on some of these high caps. Some of the low caps can obviously run. I can potentially give a bit more on those. But let's get into the first one, ASI Alliance. Everyone knows about this one. This is one of the biggest AI projects in the space, but it's only going to do it anywhere between a 5x, maybe a 6x, potentially, probably even less than that. Tau, the exact same thing. Tau is a phenomenal project, but you are at the end of the cycle. I think Tau, ASI, some of these projects are going to be very good long-term holds. But if you're looking from this cycle specifically, anywhere between a 5x is reasonable. Virtual is the exact same thing. Virtual is very centralized. 90% of the supply is held by the top 10 wallets. So you have to kind of get out before them, because once they start selling, you're going to see something like a December price when Virtual did really well, but it dumped loads as well just because it's so centralized. AIZ 5 to 10x as well. I think this is a phenomenal project as well. Has had a massive pump already. So, you have to be a bit more conservative on the price action moving forward. Nuclei is currently at the lows. I think it's a phenomenal project. The risk to reward for this project is huge. $4 million in market cap. Unlocks in November will probably get pushed back into next year. There's literally no unlocks. Team unlocks in mid 2026. All the early investors more or less got out. There is a small chunk of them left. However, they're looking to push that unlock further as well into 2026. So there's not a lot of selling pressure coming for this project. The people that are selling or sold is people that's capitulated, but this is a project that's part of, the Fetch AI ecosystem, the Peak ecosystem, Avalanche ecosystem, Filecoin ecosystem, has over 80 projects, that they've partnered with. So the ecosystem is huge, and they are going to ride on the back of Peak doing well, Avalanche doing well. Avalanche is doing very well already. And when a chain does well, people always look for the ecosystem. Peak is doing very well. People are going to start to look for projects on Peak. This is where Nuclei will step in. They are potentially, they do this buyback and burn mechanism, so they are deflationary. So 25% of the revenue goes back into buying back the token and burning, and they've just closed their first enterprise clients, which is quite decent, and they are going to potentially get more. But the product is live now, which is Nexus, and it's been trialed by companies like Toyota, which is in itself is quite massive, because it shows, even though they might not go through with it, but it shows you have a decent project or product that people are willing to use or at least try out. So I will put this in the 20 to 30x category. Risk to the reward for this project is massive. The ticker is NAI. You guys can search it up. I will put a list in the description as well, just for people that can't understand what I'm saying. Sensei, another phenomenal project. I think it will do very, very well. This is another project that's actually generating revenue now. They have close to 2,000 clients. And if you guys have seen the recent posts, there's so many people signing up to use their, chatbots, which is what they're trying to build. They're trying to build AI agent chatbots. And they have, so far, they've been very successful because people are using the product, which is what you want. Any project that generates revenue will be here in the cycles to come, because they don't need to dump the old tokens. The product is making them money, and the team is expanding. So I think Sensei will have a massive Q4. I don't see why this project can't do a 10 to 20x. $8 million in market cap, but the holders are over 40K. That's quite massive. Or another phenomenal project, has pumped 4x off the lows. So the gains are going to be minimal from this point on. If you got the lows, congratulations, you would be up 4x. Another 10x from this point on, you'll be up 40x from those lows. But it's a project backed by $50 to $20 million of revenue. They have over 100K nodes sold now across 130 countries, and they have over 350K data contributors daily. They're listed on some of the biggest, data exchanges in the world. Kaggle, there's one in China, Snowflake, etc. But this is a project, would that revenue they earn, 30% goes into buying back the token and burning. I think they've already burnt close to 50% of the supply, which is massive in itself. And they've introduced a new deflationary system. Every single new miner now from now on that joins or buys the node will have to buy back the token and burn it as well. So they'll, whatever they buy back, they have to burn. So the license fee is 60, 120 to almost $400, depending on which demos you buy. So they have two nodes. First node is $60. The second node is 120. And once it hits 20,000 nodes, everyone will have to buy back and burn. So every year, they have to renew their license, and every single time they renew, you're talking about 100,000 miners. Even if half of them renew, that is a lot of money that's going to be flow back into the token. And this is a phenomenal project. I think it can easily do a 10 to 20x from this point on. Anyone is pretty good just because it has all the shillers. Alex Becker will pump it. Depin is starting to wake up. I think it can do a 5 to 10x. Market cap is not that low. It's around 60s, between 60 to $100 million in market cap. But this project has had a lot of issues in the past. They were once part of Tor. Tor got rid of them. They tried to develop their own product. Didn't work out. And I think they've kind of moved into a new sector right now. But I can still see this doing a 5x, 6x, just because all the big shillers talk about it. AO is not a bad project. It's very, very linked to Arweave. It's like the supercomputer of Arweave. So if Arweave does well, so will AO. But if Arweave doesn't do well, then AO will struggle as well. That's the only problem with some of these projects. They kind of ride off the main chain because it's built on Arweave. If Arweave does not perform, then so will AO. So that's something you have to take in consideration when investing in this project. But I don't see why AO cannot do a 10x, 5 to 10x. I think that's reasonable just because I expect Arweave to pump at least 5x. AI Tech is very, very good. They have the links to Binance. It is a mid cap now, between $50-60 million in market cap. But they are the only AI project in the space that has a data center, which is quite unique in itself. However, volume is very, very impressive. I think what this project now needs is some tier one listings, which will come by the end of this year. I think Binance is very, very close. They are already on Binance Alpha, and they do have a lot of money behind them. I mean, they got millions of dollars in just NVIDIA. What they're called? Those NVIDIA. I can't remember the name, but the GPU machines. They have millions of dollars worth of those, and that gets used in the data center. They've recently actually got an enterprise client using the data center, which is quite massive. So I think a 10x is fairly reasonable for AI tech, anywhere between a 5 to 10x. I'll put it in the 10x category, but I think a 10x is fair for this project. Minima is very, very good layer one for Depin. But the only issue with this project is their marketing. I don't think anyone ever talks about Minima. It's a phenomenal project, some decent backers, but they lack marketing, which is always going to be an issue. So put in a 5 to 10x. I don't think it's a bad project at all, just lacks the marketing. Peak, I think Peak can do a 10x from this point on. I think a lot of big KOLs, shillers are starting to talk about Peak now. The only thing that kind of killed this project in the initial stage, which is something I told people, do not buy this until it finds the bottom near, the VC prices, which is, I think 5 cents, something around those regions, 3 to 5 cents, which it came down to around 6 cents. So it's not a bad area. That was not a bad area to buy. But like I said, most of these projects will be dead until their narrative came back. Alt was dead until Depin came back and it pumped 4x off the lows and is holding strong, looking to go higher. That's something people got to consider. Crypto works in narratives, not by individual coins. It does not matter how bad the unlocks are. If the narrative is hot, it will pump. Peak has very, very harsh unlocks, but it's pumping right now. Whereas Alt has no more unlocks left. All the early investors are out, so that's something to. I think I forgot to mention that as well. That's massive. All the early investors are out now, so there's no more unlocks for that project. AFA, phenomenal project. Like I said, this has pumped off the lows around 2x as well. I think it's the highest earning Depin coin in the space. But the unlocks are harsh. It is, close to a high cap now. So I'll put it in the 5 to 10x category. Aki, $100 million in market cap, has pumped lows after lows. If you got in early, congratulations. If you're going to buy now, I potentially would not buy now just because it's pumped so much off the lows. Wait for it to hold a price, let it come down a bit and then potentially buy. But at this current price, I don't see Aki doing more than a 5 to 10x in my opinion. I think 5x is reasonable from this current price on, which would put it at $500 million in market cap, which is quite high in my opinion for a project like Aki, which has very harsh unlocks. I own it, another project that was once upon a time very, very good. But what kind of killed it off was the unlocks. It is near the lows now, but it is the second or third highest earning Depin project. So for that reason, I can see at least, I think it can do a 10x. It's a lot lower market cap than Aether, and it hasn't pumped as high as Aether. But I think it's the second or third highest earning. It's quite good in itself. So um Geonet 5x, 10x max. I don't really see doing anything more than a 10x. It's already had the decent pump. The chart looks very, very manipulated. Has come down recently. It's starting to go back up now. It is very fundamentally strong. 5 to 10x is reasonable. Silencio will ride on the back of Peak. So if Peak does, a 10x, I don't see why Silencio cannot do a 10x as well. Neural AI, I think a 10x is possible. 5 to 10x is reasonable. But let's say, if you've been a bit of a bull moon boy, I think a 10x is on the cards. I think a lot of big KOLs do talk about neural AI. And when the market heats up and Depin is starting to heat up now, I don't see why neural cannot pump at least a 5 to 10x. Pinlink, I'll put in the same boat, 5 to 10x. It had already pumped a decent amount. Another 5x from this point on, a lot of people that got in early, some of these big KOLs, they're going to be dumping the shit out of it when it pumps another 5x. So you have to be very careful. When these KOLs get in and they're up massive, they are going to be dumping after a 5x. So, 5x for this is fair in my opinion. Natix, around 20, 30, 35 on those regions in market cap. It is the drive to earn narrative. I think it can do well. It's on Solana, it's backed by the Solana Foundation. I think it's also on the Peak ecosystem now as well, so that's always good. I think a 10x for Natix is reasonable, given the market cap. 5 to 10x. I think 10x is still on the cards. They are generating revenue. The chart looks fairly decent. That's always a plus. Flock is around 70, $80 million of market cap right now. It is going to get listed on Coinbase. I think it's been added to the roadmap. And it's also been listed on Upbit, I'm pretty sure, which is the biggest exchange in Korea. So that's always, that's a big market in itself. However, I don't, because this pumps so much off the lows, if you're looking for an entry now, you are going to get the minimum. If you got off the lows, you're obviously going to make way more money. I think I will put this in a 5x to 10x category. I think that's a reasonable amount given the market cap and how much is already pumped. OpenServe, same thing, 5 to 10x. It is an AI agent coin. It is fairly good. It's on the base ecosystem or on the base chain at least. I think a 5x is on the card for this. It is a very slow mover. The market cap is quite high. I don't really see it doing too crazy in my opinion. Taobot, 5 to 10x as well. Taobot is fairly good. It's going to ride off the back of Tau. If Tau does 5x, I don't see why this can't do at least a 10x in my opinion. Taobot 5 to 10x. Alex Becker talks about it as well, so definitely pump. Not worth. DMTR is terrible. It's pretty much got rugged, or at least had a massive crash, and they decided to migrate to a new chain, which is always a red flag for me. Asana 5 to 10x. This had a decent pump recently. When Depin kind of pumped, it pumped like 3x in one candle. Shows that some whales at least bought into that. Those are the ones that are going to cause those kind of type of candles. Spectral is terrible. Offspec is terrible. I would not invest into any of these. DEAI can do a 5 to 10x. What you have to be careful because there's a lot of FUD, or there was a lot of FUD around the team. And once that FUD came, all the whales kind of abandoned the project. And since then, they've never looked at it again. The space moves very fast. If there's any issues with the team, yes, you can pump, but you have to be careful because there's so many new projects coming out. If something had or some sort of issues in the past, people just move on. They're not going to look back, unless they have some massive announcements, which is kind of risky. You don't know if they are going to have that. So 5x, 10x, I'll probably put in a not worth, but I think it can still pump because the team is still developing. SNS not worth. This is very old. I don't know what this project is. I'll just put it in the not worth category. Someone tell me what this project is. I can't remember off the top of my head. Fluence, terrible project. I would definitely not invest into this. This has one of the worst unlocks ever, and I just wouldn't touch it. Spectral, 5 to 10x. If Virtuos can do a 5 to 10x, I don't see why Spectral cannot. It's an AI agent, very similar to, it's like a launchpad for AI agents, similar to virtuals. It kind of competes. It's a lot lower in market cap than virtuals, but that all depends if the AI agent narrative does come back. It's 50-50 right now. ChainGPT is a phenomenal project. It's already on Binance now. I think a 5 to 10x is reasonable for ChainGPT. It has a solid team, solid foundation. GPT, I don't really see this as a worthy investment anymore. I think the unlocks kind of killed this project. People got to realize if a project had very, very harsh unlocks and the project just kept dropping, a lot of the community members just move on to other projects. That's the issue. And that's the exact same thing that happened with OXO. Done very, very well. All the big KOLs were speaking about it. They tend to pump the same coins, these big KOLs, and then most of them have abandoned this. And this went down 90% because all the KOLs kind of left. 1 or 2 team members left as well. I just wouldn't touch this anymore. SDAO, this moved on ages ago. AGI can potentially do a 5x in my opinion. It's quite low. It's quite a high market cap, around 100 million right now. But they have some sort of ties in Korea. If they can get an update listing, I think it can easily pull a 5x, potentially pushing a little bit higher. But this did not do as well as I thought in December when the AI agent narrative came about, because this was actually one of the first AI agent coins in the space. This came out sometime in 2023. At that point, no one was ever talking about AI agents. This was the first one. And when the narrative did come around, it just did not perform as well as I thought it would. Cash, 5x, 10x, 5x is more reasonable. Midcap does generate a lot of revenue, which is always good. This is AIT, Rogue project, definitely will not touch it. AI Nexus is not bad. It's like the metaverse AI type of AI agent type of narrative. If that narrative is niche, could it come back? If gaming comes back, of course it can pump. You're always going to get sub narratives within gaming, which is like AI gaming type of thing. If gaming does come back, it can do really well. If it doesn't, it's a gamble. It can still pump about 5x in my opinion. Layer 1, not worth. GLQ's, I find this one as a weird one just because it's a good project. But one thing I don't like about GLQ is, they kind of jump onto bandwagons just because their own narrative that they initially launched on has just died out now. Launching dApps with AI, that narrative is dead. No one cares about that narrative anymore. So what they do now is whatever narrative runs, like 2-3 months later, they develop it as well. So when AI agent ran in 2024, 4-5, I think 4-5 months into 2025, GLQ randomly started to jump on the bandwagon and started launching AI agent stuff, which is, if your narrative is dead and you're jumping on bandwagons, that just kind of shows that you don't really have a goal in mind. You're just kind of jumping on whatever's hot. And that's what GLQ's been doing. That's one of the reasons I've always stayed away from this project. I got in very early, made a 50x on this, left a little moon bag, but since then, hasn't really done anything. So I'll put this in a 5x category. I still think because the team is developing and they're still working, it can still pump. But in my opinion, it's not a worthy investment. SharePlay is a high risk, high reward play. I don't think it's a bad project. I think they got some decent ties across the board. They're looking to get some new VCs on board recently. It's a very niche narrative, AI marketing type of thing. It can pump. It's only $1 million in market cap. It's very high risk, high reward. The team is still active. I still think this can potentially pull a 10x in my opinion. I still think just, $10 million in market cap is not that hard to get. If they get some KOLs on board, I think it can pump about a 10x. It's not going to be that hard to push it up, to a 10x. GPT, I think it's, GPT graph, whatever you want to call it. This is 5x coin, maybe a 3x coin at most. OGPU, 5x, 10x, when the Depin narrative wakes up, it will pump. Edge, metrics, terrible project. I think Octo can do a 5x. The one thing that Octo lacks is revenue, and they don't generate no revenue, and they don't really have the facilities to get the big KOLs on board. But they are still there. They're still developing, which is always good. But if you don't have the facilities in this crypto space to market yourself, you're not going to do that well. And these guys do not generate any revenue, which is always a red flag. So, Clore AI 5x, 10x. When the narrative heats up, money is going to flow across the sector. So it will have a pump at some point. Ring AI is not worth, in my opinion. This is a terrible project. Palm AI, terrible. DCI, terrible. I'll put this in a 3 to 5x category. This is Aura Chain. I don't think it's a bad project, fundamentally strong, but like I said, it's already pumped in the past. It's an old token now. People have moved on to new sectors. ICP, terrible project, would not invest into it. Late AI again. DexCheck, 5x maybe. This is I would not invest into launchpad projects just because no one at this stage of the cycle is going to be looking to get into launchpads, specifically because we're going into a bear market. Any project that launches in the next 6 months or whatever, they're all going to die out anyways because they're going to be launching at the end of the cycle. So for that reason, it's not going to be worth. These are the type of projects, if the launchpad is good, you get into them in a bear market because it's going to be cheap for you to get the allocations, and some of these launches can do very well. Octavia, 5x, 10x, this is an AI agent coin. When the AI agent narrative was hot, it did pump. But since then, all he's been doing is just continuously going down. So I don't really, it's because it had very, very bad unlocks. Anything on the AGIX ecosystem just had terrible unlocks. You should not invest into any of them. Power AI, 5x, 10x, definitely on the cards. Has all the big KOLs talking about it. I don't see why it does not pump at least a 5 to 10x. Given the market cap size, a 10x, is reasonable in my opinion. Via terrible project, would not invest. Very old, don't even know if the team is still there anymore. OFN has had a massive crash recently. It just looks like a dead project. Tars AI is not bad. I think Tars AI could potentially pump about a 10x, given how much KOLs they have. Team's still developing. He is a little bit shady, in my opinion, in terms of all the scamming the early investors and all these type of things. But since then, they're still around. They're still developing, which is always a good sign. I will give this a 5 to 10x. I'll potentially give you a 10x given the current market cap. And they do a lot of buyback. I mean, they do a lot of burns, which is always good. Dynex is ass. Render is a 5 to 10x coin. I think that kind of sums it up. If I have missed anything of, because there's so many coins, if I just list every single thing, but there's like hundreds and hundreds of projects, it will take me a whole hour to do it. I don't have time to do all that. So if any projects I've missed, ask it in the comments. I will answer your question. I appreciate all of you for coming down today. Drop a like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. I will make a robotics tier list next, just because the narrative is starting to heat up, so you guys can know which ones are good and which ones are terrible.